Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Thursday, February the 11th, 2021. Just a reminder that in about 90 minutes at 5:30 Pacific time, I will be discussing on Theater Thursday Charlie Varick by Don Siegel. So first up, question. What actually happened in Washington, D.C. on January 6th of this year? This is a very important question because the events of that day have been used as an excuse for not only impeaching President Donald Trump again, but also for essentially the creation of a narrative that America is under siege by violent insurrectionary white supremacists. There is a death toll of supposedly 6 people. One of them was someone inside the Capitol named Ashley Babbitt, who was shot to death at very close range by a police officer. Who is that police officer? Apparently, we don't know. In any other controversial case, particularly when it is the killing of a black man who's been arrested by the police, we know who that policeman is immediately, and his entire life goes under a microscope, and typically he's run out of town on a rail, but not in this case. Apparently, we had 2 police officers commit suicide a day or two afterwards, and these deaths are blamed on the so-called insurrection. Who opened the doors to the Capitol and why? And exactly how many of the people involved in this, particularly in the storming of the Capitol building itself, were feds? But let's talk about the death of Capitol Police Officer Sicknick. And this is a story from Revolver, which has got an enormous amount of attention. It was highlighted on Tucker Carlson's show. Steve Bannon and Darren Beattie have been talking about it. The story is called MAGA Blood Libel. Why are they hiding the medical report? Last week, CNN was tactically baffled by a simple question that grows stranger by the day. Why are investigators struggling to build a murder case in the death of U.S. Capitol Police Officer Sicknick? The stakes are high. Officer Sicknick's death is the only purported death by a largely tourist crowd that was led into the building by police, stayed inside the velvet ropes, seemed at least partly there out of confusion for social media clout or just for the memes, and that even the New York Times conceded caused limited property damage. That's a far cry from murder. Yet MAGA is being blood libeled by a felony murder charge in the court of public opinion and at Donald Trump's impeachment, while potentially exculpatory evidence is silenced or sealed as the Washington Uniparty mulls domestic terror laws over a MAGA bloodbath. It increasingly looks like MAGA may have been bloodbathed. Time is of the essence for the feds to release all evidence, damn the guilty, or to clear the MAGA movement of these serious allegations. The day after Sicknick's reported death, depraved toilet paper company and full-time libel factory known as the New York Times jumbotroned a massive howler headline later confirmed to be a Judith Miller-level damn dirty lie. Here's the headline. He dreamed of being a police officer, then he was killed by a pro-Trump mob. The death of Brian Sicknick, a military veteran and experienced Capitol Police officer, amplified the tragedy of Wednesday's riots and undermined President Trump's pro-law enforcement claims. Narrative 1.0 absolutely saturated the airwaves, editorials, and social media. Every MSN outlet from USA Today to the New York Post to the Daily Dot repeated that Sicknick was, quote, bludgeoned by a fire extinguisher, unquote. Not sources say, not many believe, just a totally unqualified, unequivocal statement of fact. In an unforgivable shocker, the House trial memorandum itself, which sets forth the very impeachment charges for which the 45th president stands accused, names Trump liable for insurrectionist, that killed a Capitol Police officer by striking him in the head with a fire extinguisher. Their source, the New York Times. But the Times left a real stinker inside this one because every claim they made, every detail conveyed was a lie. Quote, this is from the Times. Then on Wednesday, pro-Trump rioters attacked that citadel of democracy, overpowered Sicknick, 42, and struck him in the head with a fire extinguisher, according to 2 law enforcement officials. With a bloody gash in his head, Sicknick was rushed to the hospital and placed on life support. He died on Thursday evening, unquote. Law enforcement officials now tell CNN that there was no fire extinguisher blow, no bloody gash, and no blunt force trauma to Sicknick's body when he died. Not only that, but it is increasingly unclear when, where, and if Sicknick was even rushed to the hospital. As it turns out, multiple hours after the protest had already concluded, Sicknick texted his own brother Ken that very night that he was basically fine, other than being pepper sprayed twice, confiding that he was safe and in good shape. Then an odd thing happened. The next afternoon, the Sicknick family began getting phone calls that Officer Brian Sicknick had been declared dead. The phone calls didn't come from the hospital. They didn't come from the treating physicians. They didn't come from the U.S. Capitol Police, the FBI, or the Department of Justice. They came from media reporters. Certain privileged media personnel were evidently the first to receive sensitive information circulating among, quote, law enforcement officials, unquote, that Brian Sicknick was dead. But then the story got stranger in a dark, twisted echo of Monty Python's Bring Out Your Dead scene. It turned out Sicknick was not dead yet. The U.S. Capitol Police responded in a public statement late Thursday evening that swirling media reports were untrue. Sicknick was still alive. This is for a spokesman from the U.S. Capitol Police, quote, media reports regarding the death of a United States Capitol Police officer are not accurate. Although some officers were injured and hospitalized yesterday, no USCP officers have passed away, unquote. 1 hour later, as Sicknick's family rushed to the hospital to see what they believed was their beloved Brian still fighting for his life, the U.S. Capitol Police issued a further statement. Now Sicknick was dead. But even that statement contained a curious detail. Sicknick had been told his brother collapsed inside the Capitol building, then was rushed to the hospital. Wikipedia's entry on Sicknick still has this as the official story. But the U.S. Capitol Police statement that night told a different story. He had returned to his office at the police division first. Sometime between Sicknick being fine, healthy, and back in his office Wednesday night and dead, or effectively dead, early Thursday evening, Sicknick apparently suffered a stroke. The sequence of when and how that happened should be the easiest part of this story to put to bed, and yet we are being told to take this on faith, or as the media likes to say, without evidence. Then the story gets even odder. Acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen says the DOJ will spare no resources in getting to the bottom of what happened to Sicknick. Yet over a month after his death, precisely zero information has been disclosed by the DOJ, the FBI, the U.S. Capitol Police, the D.C. Medical Examiner, the hospital that cared for him, or the treating physicians. 1 full month after Sicknick's death, no autopsy has been released. For reference, autopsies take just 2 to 4 hours to perform, and preliminary results are typically available within 24 hours. Investigators are, quote, vexed by a lack of evidence that could prove somehow someone caused his death, unquote. Authorities have reviewed video and photographs that show Sicknick engaging with rioters amid the siege, but have yet to identify a moment in which he suffered his fatal injuries. Ominously, no finding from the D.C. Medical Examiner have been released. No announcements have been made by authorities about the ongoing process. The U.S. Capitol building is one of the most video-surveilled buildings on planet Earth, and yet no internal video footage has been released by federal authorities or has been promised to be made available. Unannounced to anyone, except incidentally in that Sicknick's memorial remains turned up in an urn instead of a coffin, Sicknick's body has been cremated. That means no further forensic analysis can be done to establish the cause or time of Sicknick's death. Why, one must wonder, would a family still be searching for answers who has no autopsy results, no death certificate, and no medical report authorize a cremation? Did they? With Narrative 1.0 turning into a total mainstream media hoax, a bald-faced lie, the size and phrenology of Brian Stelter's head, the globalist American empire media is transitioning to narrative 2.0, strategic ambiguity and rhetorical conflation. Sicknick wasn't killed by a MAGA mob. Sicknick died after sustaining injuries while physically engaging with protesters. They've silently removed the by and added a while and a with, then reframed the entire clause in the passive tense so 90% of readers conflate what happened and move on. But injured while physically engaging is like dying with COVID. Even if you died in a motorcycle crash, they count it. It's a trick. By using this framing device, the mimetic energy of narrative 1.0, the brazen lie, is preserved without readers hard forking to a more accurate narrative that describes what investigators really believe happened that day. To wit, officials killed 5 people, but how exactly did they die? And Revolver is planning more on this increasingly strange story. Let's go to the chat. Hello to random number generator, Picasso 88. Jogokin 666 says status report, country reaching critical ass. Yeah, I'll have more on that later. Hello to Hickman Warrior and William Hicks. Yes. The Machiavellians is in print. Yes, there is a version available. Well, just the version. You can get that from Amazon. And I'll be talking about the Machiavellians a little later. William Hicks says, so I guess Steven Spielberg's films are going to be banned because of that scene in Schindler's List where the kids shout and throw things at Jews being evicted and moved into a ghetto. It's possible. It's possible. Again, I would urge all of you to buy the physical media of the movies and television shows that you love, because you may not be able to get them in the near future, or at least in an unexpurgated form. Chogokin 666 says, I remember a fireman being accused of the extinguisher assault. Now, another curious thing about this, besides the official surveillance of the Capitol building, there were thousands and thousands of people filming this on their smartphones. And clearly, among those thousands of people, there were feds and there were Antifa and the like. So if this policeman were bashed with a fire extinguisher, why wasn't this video produced? Adam says maybe he died of COVID. Well, could be anything. Could be anything right now. Let's see. I wanted to say something about, oh yes, Andrea Mitchell, the revered NBC reporter who's been around since roughly, I don't know, the War of 1812, who is married to the former chair of the Federal Reserve. So she is juiced in. This is what she tweeted yesterday. Senator Ted Cruz says impeachment trial is like Shakespeare, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. No, that's Faulkner. Matthew VDR, who corresponds with me on Twitter, said she majored in English literature. Behold our intellectual elite. One of my correspondents said, this should be a new Twitter meme. I heard Senator Cruz say, ask not for whom the bell tolls. That's not John Donne. That's Hemingway. Or I heard Senator Cruz discuss the power and the glory. That's not the Bible. That's Graham Greene. Yes, there's a habit of mine that whenever I accuse someone of making a syllogism or howler, if you wish, I do a quick, Google or Wikipedia check to make sure that I am not about to commit a syllogism or howler. Not so Andrea Mitchell. She said, I clearly studied too much American literature and not enough Macbeth. My apologies to Senator Cruz. Full of sound and fury signifying nothing. That speech is one of the best known in the English language, but apparently not familiar to Andrea Mitchell. I don't know. Well, I guess we shouldn't be surprised by that. We're hearing a lot of talk now about economic anxiety. The economic anxiety of what? The white working class, the white lower middle class. And apparently it's illegitimate because, let me see if I can remember this because it's so stupid, that apparently it is racism that has led to what? The impoverishment of the white working class, the white lower middle class, or extremism, or some such, a combination of the two. Not jobs being shipped overseas. No, not H-1Bs, not relentless punishing immigration, not drug companies like Purdue getting everyone on board, including McKinsey, to push oxycodone down everyone's throats. No. It's xenophobia and racism. Ilhan Omar tweeted yesterday, it's not economic anxiety, it's anxiety over losing status and power that's fueling right-wing extremism. There is a white supremacy radicalism in our society, and we can't afford to dismiss or normalize it. This is a big lie. This is an enormous, big lie. And the people who perpetrate this lie about anything resembling white supremacism existing in the United States need to be corrected forcefully and often. I responded to Congresswoman Omar, if anything like white supremacy obtained in America, you wouldn't have been allowed to live there, let alone be elected to Congress. Give your head a shake. Or let alone be allowed to lecture white people pretty much on a daily basis how wicked they are, or how wicked the United States has been since its inception. Well, since even before its inception. Again, the United States was something like, 90% white circa 1960, and this is down to a little over 60% now. That's a very clever white supremacist plan, obviously, replacing white Americans with people who are not white. Ooh, we're through the looking glass here, people. Ann Coulter, she tweeted, someone had made the comment that no, Biden's cabinet does not look like America. That was PJ Media. Coulter responded, the country isn't 73% Jewish. Someone called Hen Mazig. Oh, there's a rainbow flag there. I'm not interested in being the good Jew that anti-Semites like. I'm interested in being the one they fear. Mizrahi, son of Amazigh and Iraqi refugees. Yes. This is a sort of new American who gets to lecture all the other Americans on what they must be and must not be. But he responded to Ann Coulter, this is what an anti-Semitic dog whistle looks like. An uninformed person would think Ann Coulter is just noting that a lot of Jews are in the cabinet. Her audience, anti-Semites, see it as evidence that Jews control America, and Ann Coulter knows her audience. Beige Sheba responded to that, I noticed you never said that she was wrong. To be frank, the main evidence I find convincing is more how many Jewish people are able to commit very serious crimes without ever facing anything more than token resistance by the state. Well, when a president's cabinet is 73% Jewish, obviously that's something that people are going to notice, given that Jews are, about 2% of the American population? Something like that. I'm prepared to admit that they are, let's say, much smarter, much more harder working, than everyone else, but 73% versus 2% of the population. Come. As far as Be'Sheba's second comment about how many Jewish people are able to commit very serious crimes without ever facing anything more than token resistance by the state, I'm not going to say that I agree with that. I'm just going to say that when someone makes a rather lighthearted comment, as Ann Coulter did, and is ferociously accused of anti-Semitism, this is the sort of thing that leads to actual anti-Semitism. If we're not allowed to notice things anymore, then this leads quickly to the argument that there actually is a conspiracy there. And that's not a good thing. Not a good thing at all. Oh, this is very exciting news from Reuters. Dozens of former Republican officials who view the party as unwilling to stand up to former President Donald Trump in his attempts to undermine U.S. democracy are in talks to form a center-right breakaway party for people involved in the discussions, told Reuters. The early stage discussions include former elected Republicans, former officials in the Republican administrations of Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, and Trump, ex-Republican ambassadors, and Republican strategists. The people involved say Republican strategists. You mean the ones that are on CNN and the ones in the Lincoln Project? More than 120 of them held a Zoom call last Friday to discuss the breakaway group, which would run on a platform of, wait for it, principled conservatism, including adherence to the Constitution and the rule of law. Ideas those involved say have been trashed by Trump. Principled conservatism. In other words, we lose, and even when we win, we lose, because we can't take on the left. We can't take on the Democrats because that would indicate a lack of decorum, and people would call us nasty names. On the other hand, we get jobs on cable TV, and we get hired as strategists by losing Republican presidential candidates, and we get think tank sinecures, so it all works out. Evan McMullin, who was chief policy director for the House Republican Conference and ran as an independent in the 2016 presidential election, told Reuters that he co-hosted the Zoom call with former officials concerned about Trump's grip on Republicans and the nativist turn the party has taken. Yes, you see, true conservatives, those who follow the precepts of principled conservatism, would never put their own people first before foreigners. No. That's just unimaginably wicked. Evan McMullin, former CIA man. So why don't they call it the Deep State Party? That's a pretty catchy name, wouldn't you say? Asked about discussions for a third party, Jason Miller, a Trump spokesman, said these losers left the Republican Party when they voted for Joe Biden. But isn't that the truest form of conservatism? To publicly embrace a man who is not only non-compos mentis, but is dominated by people of, shall we say, a radical leftist disposition, who actually seem to believe that a race war is a good thing. I'm not a political expert, but I used to call myself a conservative. For many years, I called myself a conservative, and then I don't know when the scales exactly fell from my eyes, but I suppose I woke up one day and thought, why do we always lose? Why do we always lose? And why is our conservatism, in effect, conserving all of the gains made by people who hate our guts and wish us dead? More exciting news from Associated Press, how a leading anti-Trump group ignored a crisis in its ranks. Last June, the Lincoln Project was on a high, led by several prominent former Republican consultants. Its slickly produced ads attacking President Trump made it perhaps the best known of the so-called Never Trump organizations. The group tried to claim a higher moral ground in an effort to purge Trump from the GOP. Money flowed in by the tens of millions from donors eager to help. But within the organization, a crisis was brewing. In June 2020, members of the organization's leadership were informed in writing and in subsequent phone calls of at least 10 specific allegations of harassment against co-founder John Weaver, including 2 involving Lincoln Project employees, according to multiple people with direct knowledge of the situation. The email and phone calls raised questions about the Lincoln Project statement last month that it was shocked when accusations surfaced publicly this year. It's also the first known suggestion that Weaver targeted a Lincoln Project staffer. Let's do a Control F here. Oh, okay, way down near the end of the story, the word gay appears. The allegations against Weaver followed a similar pattern in which the 61-year-old married father of 2 would allegedly send private messages to young gay men on Twitter. They often began with references to work before shifting to things like their personal appearance, workout routines, and favorite sexual positions. I don't know. I'm getting a hint of homophobia from this article. I think that it's time that, well, the Lincoln Project and principled conservatives, true conservatives, came out of the closet, as it were, and just, acknowledged just how gay conservatism is, both in the figurative and the literal sense. Yeah, apparently the Lincoln Project was very good for people involved in it, including legendary strategist Steve Schmidt, who purchased a $1.4 million modern mountain custom home in Camas, Utah, with 5 bedrooms, 7 baths, and stunning views of the Uinta Mountains, according to property records and real estate listings. Yes, apparently of the $90 million raised, most of it, I believe, more than $50 million has gone to firms controlled by the group's leaders. Let's go back to the chat. William Hicks said, Kevin, have you talked about Molly Ball's piece in Time about the secret history of the 2020 election? It's trippy fiction, but some interesting facts slipped through. I haven't. I read it. I haven't talked about it. I guess I haven't figured out how I could talk about it without being banned from YouTube. Jonathan Pohl, hello. Professor, conservatism is the ideology of conserving progressivism. Indeed, it is. And I'll just repeat myself here, that the modern conservative movement, founded by William F. Buckley Jr. in 1955 with the National Review, it was based on a deal, a Cold War deal, that the Democrats, the liberals, would be part of the Cold War effort against communism. In return, the right would surrender on all domestic issues. Now, of course, the Cold War was over by 1991, and the West won. The Soviet Union was dissolved, and it was at that time that the conservative movement should have said, okay, we have achieved our objective, time to wrap this up and move on to something else. But no, of course, they didn't do that. Let's see, 1991, 2001, 2000. It's been 30 years since the Soviet Union collapsed. But no, nothing has changed there. Russia is now the new Soviet Union, and Russia is a deadly threat to us. China, no, there's no threat from China. China's not throwing its weight around the world militarily and economically, seeking to dominate every continent on the globe. Yeah, no, it's Russia that's the real enemy. Adam asks, are the Lincoln Project log cabin Republicans? We're supposed to believe that this Weaver fellow, that no one at the Lincoln Project knew about his predilections. Really? A 61-year-old man who shows such an interest, say, in young men, their physiques and such like. This is a hard thing to keep secret, particularly if you're the kind of man, as Weaver is, who sends text messages to men, effectively, offering jobs or preferment for sex. I find it difficult to believe that there was anyone in the leadership of the Lincoln Project that didn't know about Weaver. Okay. Yeah. Lincoln Log Republican, says Chogokin 666. Hickman Warrior says Angela Merkel routinely disrespects the German flag. Well, yeah. Yes, it's the EU flag that Germans should give their allegiance to. Angela Merkel, I believe, she was a devotee of the Deutsches Demokratische Republik. She was a young communist, a prominent young communist involved in propaganda wing. It's remarkable, isn't it? Her swift ascent to the top of the Christian Democratic Union. It is my belief that everything that Angela Merkel has done since she became chancellor is in an effort to destroy Germany. Excuse me. Of the collapse of her beloved DDR. David Ray says someone noted that conservatives couldn't even conserve the woman's bathroom. Yeah. Yes, indeed. Jonathan Pohl says it took Franco 3 years of hard fighting from 1936 to 1939 for a faster and less onerous solution like a Pinochet. I won't repeat the rest of it. Okay, so what are we going to talk about next? Oh, yeah, the conservative movement. Again, kids, don't call yourself conservatives. There's a fascinating piece here from the Heritage Foundation. I'm familiar with the Heritage Foundation, and the Heritage Foundation was once, in recent history, a pro-family organization. I used to I interviewed several times one of its scholars on the family, Patrick Fagan, but I just checked and saw that he is no longer associated with the Heritage Foundation. Instead, we have Rachel Gretzler, Research Fellow in Economics, Budget, and Entitlements. And she has a piece, The Impact of a $15 Federal Minimum Wage on the Cost of Childcare. Conservatives tend to be against increases in the minimum wage or the existence of a minimum wage at all. I am in favor of a minimum wage and a fairly high minimum wage, if only because it makes it more difficult for big business to hire very low-paid people, the helot class, in fact. Shocking news, a $15 federal minimum wage would generate a cascade of unintended consequences across the U.S., including a significant increase in the cost of childcare. According to this analysis, childcare costs would increase by an average of 21% across the states, increasing childcare bills by an average of $3,728 for parents with 2 children. Some areas would be especially hard hit, with 40% or greater cost increases likely making daycare unaffordable and disrupting the labor market. Oh dear. For millions of Americans, policies that would free up resources for childcare providers to devote to wages and that would help workers achieve lasting income gains without harming others offer better solutions. Essentially, what this woman is arguing is that all women must be in the workforce. Now, of course, big business loves that. Big business loved feminism. Is match made in hell, because when women flooded into the workforce, particularly starting, the 60s and 70s, men's wages fell. And then it became necessary for there to be 2 jobs in a household. which meant that the woman is not, the mother of the children was not going to be raising her children. You hear about these super moms who are able to do it all. And I'm sure that there are a lot of women who've seen this, but there's only a handful of super moms. That's why they call them super moms. In families where both the mother and the father work, the children are going to be neglected. There is no way around it. But according to the Heritage Foundation now, that's as nothing compared to the prospect of, I don't know, businesses having to pay higher wages or perhaps a decrease in the GDP, which is the god that American conservatives worship. In a related story, this is from American Compass by Helen Andrews, whose book on the boomers I'm going to be reviewing on the book club in a few weeks. It's titled, "Why Bother with Family? If Conservatives Do Not Speak for the Family, Who Will?" As she begins, millennials are on track to be the least married generation in American history. They are running out of time to make up for the record childlessness. That's a lot of alienation and misery, some of it unnecessary. Aren't such crises what politics is for? Many on the right say no. The state has no business judging its citizens' household arrangements, they say. We don't want politicians declaring the number of babies being born is too low or the number of single women is too high. Well, any political movement which takes a stand like that is not fit for purpose. Because what the conservatives are telling us is that we don't believe in public good, the public good. No, it's all the same. It's all the same if, 100% of babies are born illegitimately. If 100% of children are raised in daycare by strangers. It's none of our business whether, because of a purported shortage of people, we have to increasingly invite the rest of the world to come to our countries. No, those are not important issues at all. Helen Andrews continues, if these are things that are distorting people's decision-making, then maybe we can tweak those, some libertarians admit. If young people are putting off marriage because of crushing college debt, then maybe we need some form of relief. If families can't afford housing big enough for their desired number of children, then maybe we need better housing policy. But family policy? No. As long as no one is preventing people from marrying and having kids, the government should stay out of it. Let everyone make their own choices and things will work themselves out. Well, it is observed everywhere in the world that the more education women have, the less children they have. And when you get to the postgraduate level, then you're looking at 1 or 0 children. And apparently we've decided that this is a good thing, that we don't want our brightest women giving birth to children, because giving birth to children is just not very important in the scheme of things. These are the same people, who say that the children are our future. But Helen Andrews continues, nearly 25% of millennial women are now projected to have 0 children in their lifetimes. Less than 5% of women say when asked that they want no children. That leaves the other 20%, millions of women who will die childless, not because they wanted to, but because they couldn't put the pieces together in time. One factor might be the very subject Sydney Smith was discussing. Education. Women have outnumbered men on college campuses for decades, resulting in an imbalance between the number of college-educated single women and the number of college-educated men available to them as partners. Yet women's standards for marriageability have remained as high as they were when the imbalance was in men's favor, wanting a partner who earns more and is at least as educated. This mismatch is one reason the share of American adults who has never married has reached a record high of 35%, up from 21% 20 years ago and 9% in 1970. It's not exactly deserting an infant for a quadratic equation, but it's not something we should ignore either. Women's preference for having a partner who has at least as much education as they do may not be rational, but it isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Well, we shall see. If constantly expanding college enrollment is cutting off large segments of the female population from a supply of marriageable men, then that is something to weigh against any attempt to boost college enrollment even further. Well, you may have noticed that amongst conservative women who call themselves conservative, who are associated with the conservative movement, the type that one sees prominently on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, pundits on television, that a great many of them are what might be called cool wine ants, that they spend a lot of their time on social media boasting about how much they drink, how often they go out, how fabulous their meals are, and how delicious their designer cocktails are, which kind of suggests to me that the women who represent conservatism are not really conservative in any real sense. Let's see. For others, it is a matter of ideology. Feminists don't like to hear anyone talk about biological clocks. In 2002, the American Society for Reproductive Medicine wanted to place ads on buses and in movie theaters informing women of various fertility-related facts to correct various false assumptions. One ad, for example, simply stated, "Advancing age decreases your ability to have children." The National Organization for Women organized a successful campaign to get the ads pulled, not because of anything in them was false, but on the grounds that they, quote, sent a negative message to women who want to delay or skip childbearing in favor of career pursuits. Well, yes, this has led to the amusing situation where we hear regularly, and from conservative women as well, that despite the fact that they have used contraception or abortion to avoid having children for, 20, 25 years, they decide that they're ready for a child at the age of 38 or 42 or 44 or 46, and they can't have one for some reason, because fecundity is not a spigot that can be opened and closed. And so we hear all about their IVF horror. And Helen Andrews concludes, conservatives should reject blinkered views. Declines in fertility and marriage rates can be taken not just as indications that something may be wrong with the economy or housing policy or college debt, but as problems in themselves. Not everyone wants a white picket fence, 2.5 children, a male breadwinner, and a stay-at-home mom. There's plenty of room for pluralism, but stable families are good, marriage is good, babies are good. Public policy should acknowledge that. If conservatives won't, who will? Well, once again, conservatives don't, and we should be done with them. Edward Luttwak noted as far back as, I believe, 1995, that America is involved in a great social experiment, that people without families, he noted as far back as that cousins had already disappeared and grandparents were on the verge of disappearing. But since the highest conservative value is choice, then why would conservatives care about any of that? Oh, yes. Women staying home to raise children, bad. Women becoming soldiers, i.e. professional killers, good. I noted, I believe a couple of weeks ago, that the U.S. Military had announced that they were letting women wear their hairstyles in different ways, because women were complaining that the mandatory hairstyle for women, which is necessary to prevent injury, was causing them migraines and all sorts of terrible problems. I had not seen this, and I rather suspect that this was suppressed for an obvious reason. This is from the fashion magazine Marie Claire. Female soldiers will now be allowed to wear lipstick, nail polish, and locks. LOCS. I don't quite know what that is. When this was first sent to me, I thought this is obviously a joke because the Army is not going to allow soldiers to wear lipstick and nail polish. The U.S. Army announced the changes, citing diversity, equity, and inclusion. How about that? Now the clean and professional appearance for female soldiers can include wearing lipstick, nail polish, earrings, and hairstyles like braids, twists, and locks, as opposed to buns. Can anyone tell me what a lock is? It's spelled L-O-C. Additionally, breastfeeding or pumping soldiers, urge to kill rising, are now permitted to wearing undershirts to better accommodate their needs. We know that actions speak louder than words when it comes to inclusivity and equity within our ranks, said Lieutenant General Gary Brito. We believe that the changes we announced today are one example of policies that put our people first. Because, yes, you can't spell soldier without I. That rather than unit cohesion and such like, it's women not being bummed out by regulations that don't allow them as soldiers wearing their uniforms in the field, in combat, from, expressing themselves as women. Again, I thought that this was a parody because how could that possibly be true? But as many have noted, we seem to have reached the point where how would anyone know that something is parody? Here's a story from Reason by Robbie Soav. The Guardian fired columnist Nathan Robinson after a joke tweet about military aid to Israel. Nathan Robinson is the editor of the leftist magazine Current Affairs and until recently a columnist for The Guardian. On Tuesday, he learned that his column would be discontinued. The reason, according to Robinson, is that he tweeted a joke about U.S. military aid to Israel that perturbed The Guardian's U.S. editor-in-chief, John Mulholland, who accused Robinson of spreading fake news and suggested the joke was anti-Semitic. Here are the two tweets. Did you know that the U.S. Congress is not actually permitted to authorize any new spending unless a portion of that is directed toward buying weapons for Israel? It's the law. Or if not actually the written law, then so ingrained in political custom as to be functionally indistinguishable from law. Okay. This seems to be pretty mild, but The Guardian, which is based in London, has been roiled by accusations of anti-Semitism involving Jeremy Corbyn, the former leader of the Labour Party. I'm obviously not a fan of Jeremy Corbyn, although he's certainly more honest in his political beliefs than Labour leaders have been for some time. I don't believe that Jeremy Corbyn is an anti-Semite. Just what so many people don't seem to understand is that the primary argument against Israel today is that it is not a multicultural state. It is a Jewish state. And since multiculturalism is the highest value of the left, states, national states like Israel must not be permitted to exist. And so this fellow Robinson, he got into it with The Guardian, and since he was not a salaried employee of The Guardian, they took the position that, well, they weren't firing him, they just weren't printing his columns anymore. Let's see. The bottom of the email, this is from Mulholland, I included a quote, it was not clear from whom, that read, saying that the only Jewish state controls the most powerful country in the world is clearly anti-Semitic. The myth of Jewish power informs murderous hatred. Delete this and apologize. Robinson says that his immediate reaction was to delete the tweet and apologize to Mulholland, not because he agreed with the criticism, but because he didn't want to lose his job. Mulholland thanked Robinson for complying, and Robinson expected that that would be that. But over the next few weeks, The Guardian ceased running his columns. Finally, this week, Robinson received confirmation that his column was discontinued. Robinson says a Guardian editor confirmed that his Israel tweet was the reason. Again, I hold no brief for this Robinson fellow, who is a Marxist. But on the other hand, if even mild joking criticism of Israel or of its political influence in the United States causes you to lose your job, then this simply, how would I say, it further confirms among people that some sort of Jewish conspiracy actually exists. And if the Guardian believes that it is working against anti-Semitism for firing people like Nathan Robinson, they are making a terrible, terrible mistake. Don't mention how powerful we are, because it's not true. Also, if you do, we will crush you. No. But there were a lot of people who took a certain degree of pleasure in what happened to Nathan Robinson. One of those was not Thomas Chatterton Williams, who was one of the signatories of the famed Harper's letter. He wrote, "A lot of people ask me what I think of Nathan Robinson being canceled by The Guardian. I think Nathan is deeply disagreeable, but he shouldn't have been fired over a tweet. Freedom of speech only means something if we defend what we dislike." Hear, hear. However, this is what Nathan Robinson tweeted on June the 10th of last year. Quote, "There is no cancel culture. The fastest way to get a book deal in this country is to whine about cancel culture. Every single one of these people ends up on their feet. They are fine. They have giant platforms. They are heard loud and clear." Well, golly. And Robinson was on the warpath about this. He just went on and on. "Oh, cancel culture. Oh, that's all the right talks about is cancel culture. Cancel culture doesn't exist." Yeah, well, you just got canceled, didn't you? You still have your magazine, but you are now officially an anti-Semite, which means that the rest of your life is not going to be good for you. In other cancel culture news from the Daily Mail, right-wing Mandalorian star Gina Carano is fired from the series over, quote, "abhorrent" Instagram post comparing Nazi murders of Jews to hating someone for their political views. The cancelists had been after Carano for a long time because she is on the right and she's a supporter of Donald Trump. Now, I think that her tweet, her comparison, it goes too far because Jews in Nazi Germany were killed not because of their political views, although it may have played a part. They were killed because of their race, pure and simple. This is demonstrated by the fact that even Christian converts, even right-wing Christian convert Jews were not spared and were murdered just the same, solely because of an accident of birth. I understand the point that Gina Carano was trying to make, and I understand that the point that Disney is trying to make, that Donald Trump supporters, people on the right, anyone to the right of us will not be employed in Hollywood. And, well, there's an obvious response to that. If they hate us so much, we are going to stop consuming their products. Pretty straightforward. Why would you send money to people who hate you and want you dead? This is from Lucas Nolan at Breitbart. Social media platform Twitter has locked the accounts of both Project Veritas and James O'Keefe following a recent report relating to Facebook's VP of Integrity. They have a vice president of integrity, Guy Rosen. The platform claims the report violates its policy on posting private information, and as a result, they've both been locked out. Specifically, how was this posting private information. Rosen said something. This was picked up on microphone by Veritas. Is that what that means? Rosen stated in leaked audio, "We have a system that is able to freeze commenting on threads in cases where our systems are detecting that there may be a thread that has hate speech or violence. These are all things we've built over the past 3 to 4 years as part of our investments into the integrity space, our efforts to protect the election," unquote. So, knowing what people really think at social media giants, well, this can't be disseminated because it would somehow contaminate the election. And I was talking about Priyanka Chopra yesterday, who was an Indian-born singer and now actress, who is best known for her not at all bogus marriage to Nick Jonas. Again, this is from Breitbart. Simon Kent. The Matrix 4 actress Priyanka Chopra, regrets appearing in advertisements for skin lightening cream and has apologized to her fans for doing so, saying the move was one of the great missteps of her career. The Baywatch star told The Guardian of the impact of the ad when she later reflected on its contents. "I felt sad, actually. I saw myself through my 13-year-old eyes when I was making concoctions in my bathroom, trying to lighten my skin tone." Elsewhere during the interview, Priyanka touched on the issue of cancel culture, saying hate and negativity have become too prevalent in the modern world. Yes, I think what she means by that is that hate and negativity are perfectly acceptable when they're directed against white people, but not when they're directed against people from India. So we may yet see this woman canceled. I don't think the media wants to talk about just how popular skin lightening creams and the like are around the world, because that would lead to people asking some questions. I don't know. Apparently, whiteness is magical. White people don't exist. But apparently we run the world and we enforce our white supremacy on everyone else. Let's go back to the chat. Okay. Jonathan Paul says in Ghana they had to ban skin bleaching creams for health reasons. What about Black women who dye their hair blonde or straighten their hair or get weaves? I don't. This is an attempt to make themselves look like they are not naturally. Why is Beyonce not attacked for this? Why is she not made to apologize for this? I could name, give me 5 minutes and I could come up with 50 to 100 names of various Black female entertainers. But there's something intersectionally that protects them. Chocokin666 says, "I love when they get hoisted on their own." I can't repeat that word. It's not petard. It's something close to it. Gamian says, right. And she no longer thinks that a lighter skin is better. Not at all. Did she give the ad money back? Says Hauper. Dionysus says, "I have never met white supremacists." If white supremacism existed, then presumably, Africa would have to be recolonized, reconquered, white man's burden, and all that sort of thing. But no one is campaigning for that, so far as I know. If white supremacism existed, then I suppose non-whites would be informed that their mores, that their habits and such like would all have to be changed to reflect white norms, or simply that there would be, say, a return to segregation in the entertainment industry. It's little known now, but there were almost no blacks in movies or on television until the 60s or the late 60s. You had blacks as servants in movies and on television, but in terms of actual characters, there was this show called Julia, I think, in the 1960s, and there was a black receptionist working for a doctor, and this was hailed as a great breakthrough. I mean, it was known at the time that advertisers did not want black people on television shows because of their belief that white people would turn the channel. Okay, Metal Mike says the Ministry of Truth deals with pretense. The Ministry of Peace that sits on defense. I'm washing my hands of what they're trying to do for us. It's for me, it's for you, it's for you. Well, the Ministry of Truth, apparently Canada is going to have an official Ministry of Truth soon enough, and perhaps the United States will follow. I don't have anything against Zionism, Dionysius. I admire the Israelis for fighting for their country. And I wish that we fought for our countries as hard as they fight for theirs. Jonathan Paul says there isn't a Jewish conspiracy, but there is an establishment line, and non-interventionist leftists like Corbyn and Robinson are now considered beyond the pale. Well, as I've been joking for about 10 years, and it's no longer a joke, that the most important question on the left is, how much do you hate Israel? And the most important question on the right, or official right, is, how much do you love Israel? Again, I have nothing against the state of Israel whatsoever, but I find it absolutely infuriating that this country, which is of marginal importance to our countries, is considered, near the top of all issues. So, yes, let's talk about what's going on in Newfoundland. Newfoundland was at least the 10th Canadian province. It became a Canadian province as late as 1949. And that happened because Newfoundland had dominion status, which means that they call that home rule, that it was, in effect, an independent country. Its status was the same as that of Canada after 1867. It was only the Statute of Westminster Bill of 1931 that Dominion countries were given control over things beyond domestic affairs. However, Newfoundland went bankrupt in the 1930s, and I believe in 1934 or 1935, its dominion status was stripped, and it was then directly ruled from London. So in 1949, there was a referendum in Newfoundland as to whether it should be independent, join the United States, or join Canada. And the pro-Canada line won, largely based on the arguments of a fellow called Joey Smallwood, one of the most corrupt figures in Canadian history, who made the very compelling argument that if Newfoundland joined Canada, this would mean an enormous amount of gibs from the rest of Canada. And so it has proved. But the media began reporting about a year ago that Newfoundland has effectively gone bankrupt again, and it will need to be bailed out by the federal government with what money? God knows. God knows what money. Because, everyone is going to have to be bailed out now. And that's not, we'll just keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. But Newfoundland is an island in the North Atlantic. And they call it the Rock because it's a barren place, rather inhospitable to human life. My view of this country and the unity thereof was profoundly affected circa 1985, when I saw this report on the CBC National, and something to do with Newfoundland. And it was in June, and they showed the harbor, St. John's, the capital, and there were icebergs in the harbor. And therein, I discovered that St. John's is closer to Milan, Italy than it is to Vancouver. And then I decided, now I understand why I really don't care about those people. But Newfoundland is cracking down. It's shaking its fist at COVID-19. Yes, largest single day increase, 53 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 on Wednesday and 32 presumptive cases. The vast majority of the people who tested positive were under age 20, health officials said. We know that people under age 20, unless they have extraordinary medical conditions, are not at risk from COVID-19. But never mind. So Chief Latrine Walla, Dr. Janice Fitzgerald, is flexing her muscles. It's lockdown time. Fitzgerald announced the suspension of all group and team sports across the province effective immediately. Group arts and cultural activities that involve gatherings and close contact, including bands and choirs, are also suspended province-wide. Starting at midnight Wednesday in what's known as the metro area, St. John's and the surrounding area, funerals, burials, weddings, and religious ceremonies are limited to 10 people, as long as physical distancing can be maintained. Retail stores that don't provide services essential to life, health, or personal safety to people or animals are close to, this sentence makes no sense, but anyway, they're closed. Okay, the misspelled word there. Closed for in-person service, but can continue with online and phone sales with delivery or curbside pickup. Personal service businesses such as spas, hair salons, tattoo shops, and tanning salons are closed. Restaurants will be closed to in-person dining, but can continue with takeout and drive-through options. Bars, lounges, bingo halls, and cinemas will be closed. It's a pretty severe lockdown. So Newfoundland then hammered by COVID-19, rocked, no pun intended. Let's see. So the epidemic is over a year old now. Total number of cases from the beginning, over a year, 610. How many people live in Newfoundland? About 521,000 people. Okay. Total deaths? 4. Yeah, I didn't misspeak there. 4 people out of over 500,000. Currently hospitalized? 0. This is barely a nuisance. And yet, effectively, the province is being locked down. I suspect that Dr. Fitzgerald, the Chief Latrine Walla, is rather envious of all the other Chief Latrine Wallas across Canada who have managed to smash society and the economy. And so she seized on this. The world has been possessed by hysterical mimesis. I think that's the best way that I can describe this. Alex Berenson, who we'll be getting to shortly, said that this is crazy and it has to end soon. Well, I pointed out to him the example of the Soviet Union, in which a madman named Stalin was in charge for 25 years. And a great many people thought this is insane and it must end soon. And the madness ended only with Stalin's death in 1953. I don't know, perhaps a better example would be World War I. A peace movement broke out in 1917. But it was decided in Britain and elsewhere that no, the senseless slaughter must continue. Because if we reach peace terms now, this would be as much as admitting that the whole war had been a mistake. Why did we prosecute this for 3 years and stop now? This would make us look foolish. No. So we just have to keep killing people in the hundreds of thousands. Ah, so we hear so much about the frontline heroes or the frontline warriors, we're supposed to call them now. And here is a sterling example from the Daily Mail. Family fury after 78-year-old woman with broken hip was left lying on a mattress on hospital floor days before she died after contracting COVID while on ward. Well done, frontline heroes. Maureen Patterson, 78, admitted to hospital after suffering from cognitive issues. While there, she had problems with stoma bag, contracted COVID, and broke hip. She died last week after doctors told family she was nearing the end of her life. I don't like that sentence. It sounds very sinister. But since COVID-19 is the only real disease that exists in the world, and all the other diseases are just wannabes, and what Britain is now saying that, people can expect a wait of a year or more for routine treatment. Vaccines. This is a growth industry. This is from CNBC. Berkeley Loveless Jr. Johnson & Johnson CEO says people may need annual COVID vaccine shots for the next several years. Unfortunately, as the virus spreads, it can also mutate, he told CNBC's Meg Tyrrell. Virus is mutating? Has the world turned topsy-turvy? I had never heard of that before. And COVID is just full of surprises. White House looks at domestic travel restrictions as COVID mutation surges in Florida. This is from the Miami Herald. The President of the United States has the power to do this. I thought that now that Orange Man Bad was gone, it was all about the Constitution again. The Biden administration is considering whether to impose domestic travel restrictions, including on Florida, fearful that coronavirus mutations are threatening to reverse hard-fought progress on the pandemic. I keep seeing this compound word, hard-fought. Where is this fighting exactly? It's a fight when you say you're not allowed to do this, do that, and do the other. You are now inessential. Again, these martial metaphors are not only inappropriate, they are sinister. Florida must be punished because it has a Republican governor, because it voted for Trump in 2016 and in 2020, and because their governor has said, in effect, we weren't as stupid here in Florida as in New York, Massachusetts, New Jersey, California, and yet our outcomes are better than yours. And we can't have that, can we? We can't let the governor of Florida actually refer to the truth, because, the truth is embarrassing. Oh, okay. So who won the Cold War, by the way? Did we win the Cold War? Apparently, we did. So why do our Western countries seem more communist with each passing day? Ian Sams, and he's the COVID comms for the Department of HHS, former spokesman for Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton. So he must be trusted. The CDC partners with the Ad Council and Warner Media for a new ad where Harry Potter, Wonder Woman, The Hobbits, and others urge Americans to mask up and slow the spread. Critical message, especially as we face down variants. Ooh, variants. So let's take a look at this video. We got Spider-Man. Okay, doesn't he wear a mask already? We've got Dr. Evil, and we have a Matrix guy, Keanu Reeves. We have Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall toasting each other with champagne, and they're about to drink it. I responded to Warner Media. How exactly can people drink champagne or anything else while wearing masks? And I know a fair amount about Humphrey Bogart. He would have punched anyone in the face who insisted that he wear a mask. So, yes. Oh, we've got the clown from It. Oh, and we've got the Joker. And we've got Harry Potter and Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Mask Up America. And yes, everyone you love in the media is telling you this. And this is just, it's just so Soviet. I wonder what the estate of Humphrey Bogart thinks about this. Maybe they could, do some, deep fakery to get Humphrey Bogart to, gay kiss, say, or make Humphrey Bogart trans. There's all sorts of no end of things that one can do to dead people. In more COVID video news. Okay, we have, if you listen to this live stream, you know that Black people are not keen on the virus. Not in Canada, not in the United States, not in Britain. So Andrew Cuomo, Governor Death, sent out a great video from HHP Horg featuring the King DMC. Let's fight fear with facts. Okay, so we see two Black people wearing lab coats. It begins with, I got the vaccine. You got the vaccine. They got the vaccine. We got the vaccine. We can get back to normal. Let me inform you, let's all get the vaccine. It's about community immunity. I'm taking unity for you and talking unity for me and you. If Dot says it's good, then it's good. Now let's all get the vaccine. I am the king of rock. There is none higher. DMC, I will inspire. Yeah. And then this ad goes on to compare. Oh, it's 90% effective and legit. It goes on to compare COVID-19 to polio and smallpox. Yes. And do we still make a fuss about Lysenko and the fake science of the Soviet Union? I don't know. Late last year, I just thought, I don't know how much crazier this can get, but I don't know how much more of this I can take. And I'm sure there are many who share my fear. But no, that was only the beginning. From Lockdown Skeptics, what happened to Hancock's promise of a great British summer? This is from Will Jones. Hard to believe it was only 11 days ago that Matt Hancock was telling Brits they could look forward to a great British summer. Yesterday, Transport Secretary Grant Shapps turned up on breakfast TV to pour icy water on that ember of hope and tell the country to hold off on their summer plans, and the UK too, not just abroad, because we can't go back to moving around the country until everyone is vaccinated. As for traveling abroad, that's off the table until the whole world is vaccinated. It's not a Berlin Wall, really, because that would be an outrageous suggestion. It's more of a hug, actually. It's just a hug, confining people in their country, confining people in their in their towns, perhaps even their neighborhoods, their streets. But don't call it a wall. Again, more of a hug. Historian and Lockdown Skeptics regular Guy de la Bédoyer has written a new piece for us, complete with an edited transcript of Charles Walker's inspiring turn on BBC Radio yesterday morning. Living in Britain 2021 is like cowering in a submarine while enemy depth charges explode all around you. You daren't rise to the surface and instead just sink lower and lower. The only difference is it's our own government dropping them. Because that's what governments do. Everyone agrees that is the proper purpose of government, is to terrify people, to make it difficult or impossible for them to earn a living, or just to generally smash the economy, and to let everyone know that social life is irresponsible and dangerous. If you're not happy staring into a computer screen and with all of your relationships being virtual, then you are a killer, a murderer, a COVID-19 denier. MP Charles Walker said on Sky News that the long-lasting lockdown is bordering on very dangerous, robbing people of hope. Well, it's long past bordering on very dangerous. Again, from lockdown skeptics, following Tuesday's perfunctory dismissal by the World Health Organization of the lab leak hypothesis, Ian Burrell in Unheard is dismayed by the WHO's blatant kowtowing to China and apparent lack of curiosity about the facts, which got this post removed from Facebook. Yeah, apparently you could still link to it on Twitter for the time being. Breitbart News reports that the WHO advisor Jamie Metzel told Fox News that the actual investigation was done by Chinese authorities, and so the WHO investigators were basically receiving reports from Chinese officials. And Facebook said this post repeats information about COVID-19 that independent fact checkers say is false. Independent fact checkers are the modern equivalent of political commissars. Professor Carol Sikora reports that lockdowns cause more deaths than they prevent, and this is a new article in a peer-reviewed journal. Anything else from here? Oh, Boris Johnson sets out the new normal on vaccines. We need to get used to the idea of vaccinating and then revaccinating in the autumn as we come to face these new variants. Are we going to all end up like junkies, that we're going to have to, keep searching for new veins because, the major ones have been, broken, busted by continued hypodermic jabbing? Is that what's going to happen to us? Maybe the broken veins and the mottled skin or whatever will be seen as a kind of badge of triumph by all the Karens. And I'm going to move on to Alex Berenson. We're coming up soon on Theater Thursday. And I'll just go to Berenson here. Okay, here we are. Nick Confessore had said Trump's prognosis became so worrisome before he was taken to Walter Reed that officials believed he would need to be put on a ventilator. Berenson comments, the perfect story for our times, breathlessly reporting on a non-event to the non-president. Really, the headline wants to be, we were so close. How awesome would it have been if he'd wound up on a vent? From AP, President Biden says that the U.S. will have enough coronavirus vaccine to inoculate 300 million Americans by the summer. Biden says Moderna and Pfizer will deliver the doses by the end of July, more than a month earlier than initially anticipated. Berenson says, yay, 4 to 6 shots for all the people who want them. That'll show those pesky variants. Also, buy stock in EpiPen. Finally, from Berenson, vaccine advocates need to start rationing down expectations for the Pfizer, Moderna, mRNA vaccines immediately. The Israeli data is increasingly clear. The clinical trials significantly overstated their efficacy. Meanwhile, the U.S. side effect reports are ugly. Many people who get these wind up knocked out for a day or more, and some healthy people appear to have had some really serious reactions. Severe anaphylactic shock, thrombocytopenia, heart attacks, even possibly miscarriage. Look at the reports before you dismiss them. Trying to pretend that these cases aren't happening or ignoring them is not going to work. It will only ratchet distrust even higher and may even make it impossible for a potentially better vaccine with fewer side effects to succeed. And, yes, we've got zero COVID coming up. No, we're just going to eliminate it. Totally. Just like we did with influenza, right? But no, that is not grand enough. Again, I was sent this and I thought, this is, it's a right-wing parody because it's Ezra Klein and he's a jerk. But no, it's true. Should we dim the sun? Will we even have a choice? I'm not making this up, folks. We are as gods and might as well get good at it, Stuart Brand famously wrote in the Whole Earth catalog. Well, I'll break in here to say that Pascal famously wrote that men are neither beasts nor angels, but those who attempt to raise him to the level of an angel invariably degrade him to the level of a beast. Back to Ezra Klein and the New York Times, human beings act upon nature at fantastic scale, altering whole ecosystems, terraforming the world to our purposes, breeding new species into existence, and driving countless more into extinction. The power we wield is awesome. But Brand was overly optimistic. We did not get good at it. We are terrible at it, and the consequences surround us. Yeah. So we are going to be looking at solar radiation management. We are going to start messing with the sun because, one often hears about worst case scenarios. Yeah, we're going to dim the sun. And what could possibly go wrong with that? Literally the extinction of life on Earth. But it's worth a shot, right? I mean, why not? We are as gods. They say that hubris is followed by nemesis, but maybe that's no longer true anymore. I'm going to read from James Burnham's The Machiavellians. I'm up to part 4, Georges Sorel, A Note on Myth and Violence. The function of myth. Georges Sorel cannot be considered in all respects a Machiavellian. For one thing, he was a political extremist. Though Machiavellian principles are not committed to any single political program, they do not seem to accord naturally with extremism. Further, Sorel partly repudiates or seems to repudiate scientific method and to grant, in certain connections, the legitimacy of intuition and of a metaphysics derived from the French philosopher Henri Bergson. To the extent that he rejects science, Sorel is certainly outside the Machiavellian tradition. However, Sorel's repudiation of scientific method is largely appearance. In reality, he attacks not science, but academic pseudoscience, what he calls the little science, how very prescient of him, that pretends to tell us about the nature of society and politics, but in truth is merely seeking to justify this or that group of power seekers. Well, that's all that science is today, isn't it? Sorel does indeed contend that genuine scientific doctrines are not enough to motivate mass political action. But this conclusion, far from being anti-scientific, is reached by careful scientific analysis. Moreover, Sorel shares fully what I've called the anti-formalism of the Machiavellians, the refusal to take at face value the words and beliefs and ideals of men. In common with other Machiavellians, he defines the subject matter of politics as the struggle for social power, and he makes the same general analysis of the behavior of political men, that is to say, as they act in relation to the struggle for power. Sorel also requires mention because of his influence on the other Machiavellian writers, Robert Michels and Vilfredo Pareto, with whom we shall soon be concerned. Pareto more than once gives tribute to Sorel. He writes, for example, quote, "It was the surpassing merit of Georges Sorel that in Reflections on Violence, he threw all such fatuities overboard to ascend to the altitudes of science. He was not adequately understood by people who went looking for derivations and were given logico-experimental reasonings instead. As for certain university professors who habitually mistake pedantry for science and, given a theory, focus their microscopes on insignificant errors and other trifles, they are completely destitute of the intellectual capacities required for understanding the work of a scientist of Sorel's stature," unquote. Burnham continues, Sorel, both through his writings and through personal acquaintance, played a considerable part in the transformation of Michels into a Machiavellian, which occurred when Michels took up residence in Switzerland after an earlier career at a German university. I propose to deal only with 2 points discussed by Sorel in his most famous work, Reflections on Violence. However, to understand the treatment of these points, it is necessary to summarize briefly the context in which the book was written. Sorel was at that time active, chiefly as a journalist and theoretician, in the French and to some extent the international revolutionary labor movement. The greater part of the politically organized labor movement adhered in those days to the various social democratic parties of the Second Internationale. The activities of these parties were reformist. The parties were large in size and institutional strength and devoted themselves to winning economic concessions, higher wages, social insurance, and so on for the workers, and parliamentary or governmental posts for the party leaders. Ostensibly, however, the party program still professed the goals of revolutionary socialism, the overthrow of capitalism, and the institution of a free, classless society. Sorel spoke for the dissident revolutionary syndicalist wing of the labor movement. The syndicalists were opposed both to the state, not only to the existing state, but to all states and governments, and to all political parties, including the professedly labor parties. They advocated the economic self-organization of the workers in revolutionary syndicates, that is, unions, with no professional officials and absolute independence from the state and all political parties. The state, whether the existing state or any other, they consider to be merely a political instrument for the oppression of the masses. Political parties, socialist as well as all the rest, have as their object the attainment of state power. Consequently, political parties are part of the machinery of oppression. If the Socialist Party took over governmental power, this would not at all mean the introduction of socialism, of a free and classless society, but simply the substitution of a new elite as ruler over the masses. This analysis, we may remark, coincides exactly with that made by the other Machiavellians. In the later discussion of Robert Michels, we shall see in detail how it applies to the parties of socialism. In contradistinction to the allegedly scientific socialism of the official parties to their elaborate programs of immediate demands, immediate demands and desired reforms to their lengthy treatises on how socialism will be brought about and what it will be like and how it will work, Sorel insists that the entire revolutionary program must be expressed integrally as a single catastrophic myth. The myth, he maintains, of the general strike. The myth of the general strike is formulated in absolute terms. The entire body of workers or proletarians ceases work. Society is divided into two irrevocably marked camps. The strikers on one side and all the rest of society on the other. All production wholly ceases. The entire structure of the existing society and all its institutions collapse. The workers march back to begin production again, no longer as proletarians, but as free and unruled producers. A completely new era of history begins. Only such an all-embracing myth, Sorel believes, can arouse the masses to uncompromising revolutionary action. No detailed rationalistic program, no careful calculation of pros and cons, no estimate of results and consequences can possibly be efficacious. Indeed, the effect of such programs is to paralyze the independent action of the workers and to place power in the hands of the leaders who devise and manipulate the programs. It is not the specific myth of the general strike as treated by Sorel that particularly concerns us, but rather the more general problem of the positive role of myth in political action. What kind of construction is such a political myth? If we interpret it as a scientific hypothesis, as a prediction about the future, it must be regarded as absurd, fantastic, false. But this interpretation, Sorel thinks, would be irrelevant. Nor is the myth in the least like a utopia, although at first there might seem to be a close resemblance. Like a scientific hypothesis, a utopia is an intellectual product. It is the work of theorists who, after observing and discussing the known facts, seek to establish a model in which they can compare existing society in order to estimate the amount of good and evil it contains. It is a combination of imaginary institutions having sufficient analogy to real institutions for the jurists to be able to reason about them, whilst contemporaneous lead men to prepare themselves for a combat which will destroy the existing state of things. The effect of utopias has always been to direct men's minds towards reforms which can be brought about by patching up the existing system. A myth, in contrast to hypotheses or utopias, is not either true or false. The facts can never prove it wrong. Now, one of the reasons why the left has been so much more successful than the right is because of its use of myth. Let's talk about some contemporary myths. White supremacy. White supremacy cannot even be defined let alone proved, but it has been a very successful motivating tool for the left, that the world groans under the oppression of white supremacy. Even white people groan under white supremacy. Let's look at climate change, climate extinction, that we're all going to die unless the economy is turned upside down. Let's look at the feminist myth, that men are essentially the same as women and vice versa, that there are no significant differences between them. And any attempt to regulate society based on supposed biological differences between men and women is mistaken and wrong. There are many others I could cite. But the left has myths and the right has facts and logic. And facts and logic always fail against myths. And I will return to Burnham's consideration of Sorel and myth tomorrow. I'm going to move on to Theater Thursday, but let's check in with the chat first. William Hicks says female soldiers can shave their hair short, just like the men. Okay. Open borders for Israel. I don't know. Israel was fooling around with this foolish notion that there were all of these black Jews that needed to be repatriated to Israel. Well, they've stopped doing that, haven't they? We're talking about Lukács, the Hungarian Marxist, whose book about Solzhenitsyn I read when I was in high school. I came across this book again decades later, and I thought, I must have been a marvel as a teenager, because the very idea of attempting to read Lukács as an adult, it's just, I'd rather stick pins in my hand. Professor Pohl points out that Lukács was part of Bela Kun's communist regime in Hungary before joining the Frankfurt School. Yako Rapala says, our Finnish friend says, America won the Cold War by becoming Soviet Union 2.0, gaining the loyalty of leftists who were disillusioned by the USSR, first in trickles and as a flood after Stalin's death. Yes, it has been observed by many. Neoconservatism, which is now just conservatism, is quite literally a Trotskyite foundation. Let's see. Laramie Hirsch responds to Rapala. Another way to put it, America beat the Soviet Union by becoming much worse, much more horrific, and much more methodical than the Soviets could ever be. You know, I mentioned this before, but back during the Cuban Missile Crisis, when it looked like the world could blow up, and as young boys, we were all very excited by the prospect of a nuclear war. But someone asked in school, like, what's the difference between us and them? And it was explained to us that in the Soviet Union, you're always being told, do this, don't do that. That there are billboards everywhere saying, you know, fulfill the 5-year plan. Or if, you know, potatoes suddenly were found in stores, buy potatoes, this sort of thing. And there was apparently nothing that that you could do that wasn't being watched, and you weren't being judged on, and we all shittered. And then we turned out to be just like that, only worse. That, yes, let's turn on TV to watch some sitcom repeat, and let's find out about venereal disease and the myths about venereal disease, or STDs as they call them. That there is no getting away from the pause propaganda. It is relentless and it is omnipresent. Ricardo Williams says medical masks are best confined to operating rooms and sex dungeons. Gandalf White says the cultural Marxists won the institutions. Yes, the long march through the institutions that Gramsci talked about. It turned out that the right, or at least the conservative movement, was not interested in these things. Not interested in culture. not understanding the importance of culture to politics. Okay, I am going to move on to Theater Thursday. 9 minutes late, but never mind that. And our movie today is called Charlie Varick. It has an alternate title, The Last of the Independents. That's the title that Don Siegel wanted to go with, but he was overruled. Siegel lived from 1912 to 1991, and previously, when I was doing this on Luke Ford's live stream, I talked about his most famous film, Dirty Harry. Siegel, I like to say that if Siegel had been French, the critics would never stop carrying on about him as an auteur. Let's look at, I'll just mention some of his movies, which have been popular and influential and acclaimed. Riot in Cell Block 11, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the first one. This movie's been made, 3 or 4 times? It's commonplace to say that Invasion of the Body Snatchers is about McCarthyism. Don Siegel himself, at least I have read this, said that no, the movie is actually about Hollywood and what it does to people. Flaming Star, Hell is for Heroes, the remake of The Killers in 1964, which was Ronald Reagan's last film. Coogan's Bluff, Madigan, Two Mules for Sister Sarah, The Beguiled, Dirty Harry, and Clint Eastwood has said that that Don Siegel was his American Sergio Leone. And I guess his last great film, which also stars Clint Eastwood, was 1979 Escape from Alcatraz. Escape from Alcatraz is filmed by Bruce Surtees, who liked black. He liked the color black. And for years, I saw this film on television, on lo-fi television, and I didn't think very much of it. And then when I saw it on Blu-ray, I thought this is like a completely different film. And Dirty Harry, as I grew up watching Dirty Harry on broadcast television, on crummy old distorted TVs, and it simply, watching it as is intended to be seen is like night and day, no pun intended. So Charlie Varick came out in 1973. It was the film that Siegel made immediately after Dirty Harry, and it shares some things with that film. It is the music is by Lalo Schifrin, and it seemed like Lalo Schifrin made the music for every kind of film like this. Of course, his theme song for Mission Impossible was heard every Sunday night in America. Andrew Robinson is also in this film. And I just want to check something here about Dirty Harry. Warner Brothers Pictures, okay. This film is made by Universal. And if you go to Trailers from Hell, you'll find an appreciation of this film, a short appreciation of this film. Howard Rodman Jr., whose father co-wrote the screenplay, and another screenwriter talk about it. And they talk about how Charlie Varick was one of the last of the studio pictures. And the advantage of working with a studio is that you have all of these resources. You have all these actors, directors, and the like under contract. So much easier to put pictures together in those days than it has become. This film was written by Dean Reesner, who also co-wrote Dirty Harry, and as mentioned, Howard A. Rodman. It's based on the novel The Looters by John H. Reese. And it is the story of it's a story of a heist gone bad. It's a story of finding yourself in possession of an enormous amount of money, bad money. And there's a lot of movies about this. A Simple Plan is one. Shallow Grave is another. Many such movies. And it's become a movie cliche. That is to say, if you come into the possession of gangster money, drug money, run for your lives, because it is not going to turn out well. This movie reminds me, in a lot of ways, of a movie that I've reviewed, and you can find it at the Two Kevins YouTube channel, called The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, which also stars Walter Matthau. And it was made, I don't know, maybe a year later than this one. It's a very 70s kind of movie. It's trim. There's not a lot of unnecessary things in it. It is resolutely unsentimental, and we only learn as much about the characters as we need to, which is much the best way. I would say that The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 is a perfect movie, and so is Charlie Varick. That the use of foreshadowing in this film is it's masterful, absolutely masterful. To give you an example, right near the beginning of the movie, when the evidence of the heist is being destroyed, that Charlie Varick, played by Walter Matthau, says to Andrew Robinson's character, Harmon Sullivan, "Surprise me. For once, do as I say." And you just see that there's this tension. There's this tension between Charlie and Harmon, because Harmon is a young man and he's a hothead, and he doesn't follow orders, and he thinks that Charlie is an old fool and that he knows better. And you see right from the very beginning of the movie that Charlie sees Harmon as a liability, perhaps a fatal liability. Walter Matthau was a great actor, one of the great American actors, and equally adept in both comedy and in drama. He won an Academy Award for The Fortune Cookie in 1966, which is a Billy Wilder film with Jack Lemmon. And of course, Matthau made a great many movies with Jack Lemmon. The Fortune Cookie is a hilarious movie. Walter Matthau, despite his, his jowls, his deputy dog look, became a huge movie star in the 1970s and the 1980s. And of course, what? He looks like that? And he's a movie star? Even a romantic lead? Well, yes. And to those who mock the idea of Walter Matthau's character, Charlie Varick, being so popular with the women, I would say, do you see his wife at the beginning of the movie? That Charlie Varick is a powerful, confident man, also laconic. He doesn't say anything more than needs to be said. And those three qualities go a long way with women. I wanted to say something about the women in this film. The three leading female roles. We have Sherry North as Jewel Everett, Felicia Farr as Sybil Fort, and we have Jacqueline Scott as Nadine, who is Charlie's wife. All three of these women are over 40. Two of them are 41 at the time the movie was filmed, and one of them was 42. What is significant is they look their age. There is no attempt to make them look as if they're in their 20s. Now, these are good-looking women, no question about it. But just as in the 70s, someone like Walter Matthau could be, an action hero, a movie star, and even a romantic lead. In the 1970s, it was possible to have mature women be cast in sexy roles with an appreciation of, I don't know what you say, their natural beauty. This is Another 70s thing about this, and you see the same thing in The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, the importance of casting, of character roles. And I'll mention some of the character actors in this. The great Canadian actor, the great Polish-Canadian actor, John Vernon. I've mentioned Sherry North, Felicia Farr, and Jacqueline Scott. You have Norman Fell, and Norman Fell is a very experienced veteran actor. You may be familiar with him with the leering, disgusting character he played in Three's Company and then the spin-off, The Ropers. Well, Norman Fell could act. You had Woodrow Parfrey, William Shallert, who played Patty Duke's father on the Patty Duke Show. And Shallert later became a favorite of Joe Dante. You might remember him as the doctor of the film, within a film, Mant, in Joe Dante's Matinee. Benson Fong, Tom Tully, Albert Popwell appears. He is the fellow that you will remember from Dirty Harry, where he is on the sidewalk in front of the bank, and he says to Harry Callahan, "I gots to know." Yeah, it's that guy. Yes, this is one of the things you want to do when you make a good movie, which is just fill every part, however small, with the best actors that you can find. So, at the beginning of the movie, we see a small town in Mexico coming to life from the time of sunrise. And we see these kind of bucolic scenes as the sun comes up, as the day begins. And we get a sense of this small town, Tres Cruces in New Mexico. Actually, the movie was filmed in Nevada, but Nevada fills in for New Mexico. And one of the joys of this movie is the beauty of the American Southwest. Cinematography by Michael C. Butler. Great location shooting. Almost all of this movie is shot on location. That was another 70s thing, by the way. 70s filmmakers following, the new wave in France, filmmakers in America in the 1970s. They wanted to move out of the studio and, show real places. And this movie is spectacularly effective in that respect. I'm going to mention the art direction, which as well is outstanding. In any event, so we see the town coming to life, and we see people doing various things, and we see young people doing various things. I mentioned Lalo Schifrin's music, and I have to think this was some sort of joke or whatever, that suddenly we get the wah-wah guitar as we cut to a scene of a good-looking teenage girl wearing the skimpiest halter top I have ever seen. And then we get a cut of a young woman wearing Lycra short shorts, walking down the main street. And she is wolf whistled. I'm sure she was terribly annoyed by this. And we see a Lincoln Continental in a very 1970s color. It's yellow. Why would you have a Lincoln Continental and have it yellow? I can't understand that. But anyway, it pulls up to this small bank, Tres Cruces Bank. And we see a good-looking woman at the wheel, and we see an old man in the passenger seat. And Charlie Varick is under heavy makeup. And a policeman, a friendly policeman, comes up to them and says, "You're parking in the red zone." And we get the song and dance about how the old man here has broken his ankle, and he's wearing a very visible cast with a metal extension on it. And there's some good business there where he gets into a fake argument with his wife that his wife considers him this old fool, can't cash a check, and he just wants to cash the check and come out of the bank. And so he heads into the bank, and we find out that it's a heist. And I'm afraid that the policemen pay dearly. They didn't want to be mean to the pretty lady, and a bunch of them get shot. Now, of course, there's a problem with morality in films of this type. Charlie Varick doesn't kill anyone. Well, let's say he doesn't kill anyone who doesn't deserve to be killed. In fact, it's his wife who turns out to be an excellent shot as well as an excellent driver. Two people are killed inside the bank, including one of the people behind the heist. Walter Matthau comes in. There's already two people inside the bank, but they roar away with two canvas bags, and we find out that Charlie Varick's wife, Nadine, has been shot. Great action footage. Great chase footage, car crashes, excellent stuff, not over the top at all. And we see that this heist has been very intricately planned. You know, how do you get rid of the evidence? Well, they have an excellent plan for getting rid of the evidence, but unfortunately, Al Dutcher, one of the heist members, is dead, and Nadine bleeds out in the car. And Harmon, hurry up, you know she's dying. It's true enough. Charlie loves his wife, and he doesn't take this very well. You know, any man wouldn't take it very well. And there's no song and dance made over her death. We just see Charlie taking her wedding band off her hand and putting it on his own. On the ride back, we hear a little bit of Charlie's history. He used to be a stunt flyer. He and his wife and a biplane used to do shows where they would do tricks, wing walking. And he used to do a drunk act where he would pretend to be a sailor on leave, holding a bottle of whiskey, and wander out. And the audience would be gasping because it appeared that, he was, about to be run over by the plane, killed at any moment. And he nearly died doing this. So he decided, how can I still fly and make a living? Well, he went into crop dusting, the last of the independents. Only the big combines came in and not much money to it. So it took up robbing banks, small banks that are not FDIC insured. So the feds don't get involved. And that's as much narrative exposition as you get in this film, which I think is great. Now, the big reveal is when they get back to the trailer. Oh, I should mention that one of the occupants of the trailer park is this old English woman who seems as if she's wandered in from a Donald McGill postcard. And she talks about mashers, how there are mashers everywhere. And this woman appears to be like 75 years old. But apparently all these men are after her, and she's getting obscene phone calls. Later, we hear her singing a risque, a British music hall tune. It's all very amusing. Anyway, let's see what we have inside the bags. Big shock. There's a lot of money. There's only supposed to be $30,000. Eventually, it turns out to be $765,000. And Harmon is delighted. He's going to be getting 1/3 of this. Charlie's going to get 2/3 because he's taking Nadine's share. Harmon has no problem with that, but Charlie attempts to explain to Harmon that it's a mixed blessing. to put it mildly. And he says to him, you know what dirty money is? That's the kind of money you can't declare on your income tax. Well, when certain people get that kind of money, what they do is send it out of the country to invest. And when it comes back, it's clean. So maybe that little bank was a drop, a collection point. Maybe all this was on its way out of the country. Fantastic. We lucked out. More like crapped out. It's 10 to 1 this stuff belongs to the mafia. This is gambling money skimmed off the top. Whore money, dope money. What's the difference? The difference is the mafia kills you. No trial, no judge. They never stop looking to you, not till you're dead. I'd rather have 10 FBIs after me. And so he tells them, we're going to have to keep pretty quiet for a while. Is that so? That's right. Best way to get nailed is to start tossing that stuff around. And what's your idea of a while? 3 years, maybe 4? Are you telling me that I can't spend none of this money for 3-4 years? Right. That's what I'm telling you. And you better lay off that juice too, whiskey, because he doesn't like dentists. He doesn't like cops, and he doesn't like dentists. So he has an infected tooth, which he treats with copious amounts of whiskey. That's another way to get nailed, me along with you. And of course, you're asking a lot of a man who is in possession of slightly more than $250,000, which would be worth about $3 million or more in today's money, and say, you can't touch this. It's asking a lot. And of course, Charlie notices right from the very beginning that Harmon is not up to it. He's clearly not up to it. So Charlie has a big problem. Harmon thinks, well, you can fly. You can just fly us out of here. Where? All the airports are going to be watched. Oh, you can fly us to Mexico. He says, especially Mexico. Well, you'll figure it out. So Charlie says, well, yeah, I'd have to get an auxiliary tank for the plane. And so then Charlie starts doing things. And what he is doing and why he is doing them remain a mystery for the longest time. But as is pointed out in that appreciation on Trailers from Hell, when one sees the film a second time, of course, it was pretty obvious the first time around, but there's a lot of it, and it is complicated. So it is indeed mafia money. And this is how we are introduced to John Vernon. And John Vernon is he's the head of this chain of banks, this Fidelity chain of banks. And he has a big problem because why was there, over $750,000 there? It wasn't supposed to be there for long, and now it's gone. And John Vernon is a smart man. Pretty much everyone in this movie is smart, except for Harmon. And I like seeing movies with smart people in them. And John Vernon realizes from the beginning that his mafia bosses are going to think that this is an inside job, because what else could it be? How could anyone know that there was that much money in this tiny bank in New Mexico? So he enlists Joe Don Baker to find out, what's going on, get the money back, do it as quickly as possible. Joe Don Baker, he's really good in this movie. And one of the things I liked about the script and the direction is that he is no more nasty than he needs to be. He's a nasty character, no question, but his nastiness is all in aid of the job. It is not gratuitous. I should mention that this is the kind of movie that you would get stern warnings from any streaming service or network about watching it, because it includes racial slurs. Oh dear. There's all sorts of racial slurs in this, but it's all very casual. And we have a black man making racial slur about Chinese man, white man making racial slur about black man. And I should point out that this movie was written by Jews, and it was directed by a Jew, and it was made by a Jewish studio. But there's this line in it. There is the district attorney for the county in New Mexico is named Garfinkel, played by Norman Fell. And he won't let John Vernon, Murdered Boyle, into the bank because, it's sealed for investigation, and John Vernon is very put out about this, not least because of the trouble that he's in. And so he takes a dislike to this fellow Garfinkel, and he keeps mispronouncing his name, calling him Finkel. And later he's talking, I'd never heard this one before. And so he has a discussion about whether he's being tapped, being surveilled. And he says they'd have to get a court order first to install a listening device. Oh, I'm not talking about that bright little bagel snapper from the district attorney's office. I couldn't help laughing. But as I say, there's just an acceptance in this film that this sort of casual racial epithet slinging, it's just the manner of the day. Nothing really is made of it, because why would you want to make anything of it? There's another little thing that I quite liked, and you maybe wouldn't notice it if you weren't paying attention. Joe Don Baker goes to another mafia place, which is a Chinese restaurant run by Benson Fong. Now, Joe Don Baker is called Molly. We don't know why he's called Molly. A lesser movie, a movie made today, would explain why he's called Molly. Whether Molly is his last name or a corruption of his last name or a corruption of his first name or just a nickname, not explained. Joe Don Baker was a big man. And so there's some humor over the fact that this big man is called Molly, but anyone who makes fun of his name soon regrets it. But he shows up at this Chinese restaurant in Reno. Much of the movie is shot in Reno. And it's a great location photography there. And so the Chinese woman, who is, I don't know, what, maitre d', I suppose you could say, of the restaurant, she's dressed in a traditional long Chinese tight-fitting dress. And he says, Joe Don Baker says, Molly says that he wants to talk to Benson Fong. And she responds in this like sing-song Chinese accent, "Oh, he not here, you come back later," etc., etc. And he says, "It's Molly." And immediately she switches to her normal speech, which is American accent, because obviously she was raised in America. I quite liked that. Now, Joe Don Baker is a smart man, and he immediately thinks, well, this is an inside job, wasn't it? And I don't want to be the fall guy for this. So Benson Fong informs, Benson Fong hadn't really thought of this, and this makes sense. And so he says, look, I'm going to give you carte blanche. And of course, if you prove this is an inside job, then, your credit with the mafia is going to be very high. Meanwhile, we find out about the fellow who runs the local bank, who's a rather pathetic character. And when John Vernon actually meets him off premises, he hadn't really thought of, why did you give up the money? Have you ever had a gun pointed at your head? And he hasn't really appreciated the situation. Woodrow Parfrey playing Harold Young. And we just have some devastating dialogue that John Vernon is taking this better than Harold Young is. He says to him, "You need a rest, Harold, a long trip to someplace quiet, another name, another country. I can't start my life over again now. You don't have much choice, Harold. They're going to try and make you tell you where the money is. You know what kind of people they are. They're going to strip you naked and go to work with you with a pair of pliers and a blowtorch." And Maynard Boyle, John Vernon explains, it's our mafia friends who won't understand. They're going to wonder why you led them straight to the vault with the money in it instead of the empty vault in the rear. And he said, yeah, talk about an inside job. And Harold Young can't believe it. He says, it's just a coincidence. Maynard Boyle says, that's the way their diseased minds work. A bank gets it, bang, they look for a double cross. Why couldn't it just be a coincidence? Because they don't believe in coincidence. So Charlie has, he got the police after him, and he has the mafia after him. And he comes up with a rather daring plan, which is to lead both the mafia and the police directly to him. And again, this seems crazy. It seems absolutely crazy. But again, he has a long con at work. He's not interested in short cons. He manufactures these short cons, which, oh, yes, we figured out his plan. Well, that really wasn't the plan. I mean, I have to say that the intricacy of Charlie Varrick's plan is really quite reminiscent of the things that you see in David Mamet movies. And one is continually impressed by just how ingenious he is. He can't get a hold of John Vernon. He wants to tell John Vernon that he's going to give the money back. Well, he's not going to give the money back, but that's the plan. And he can't get a hold of him, and the secretary is not very accommodating. And we learn that the secretary, Felicia Farr playing Sybil Fort, is John Vernon's mistress. And she lives very well as a result when we see her fabulous 70s pad. But so he has to get a hold of this woman. Well, he knows where she works, but he doesn't know what she looks like and doesn't know, how could he find her? He sees a boy in the street selling flowers. Give me all your roses, he says. He hands him a $20 bill. He says, will that do? And the boy is quite pleased. It's a big tip. Roses were a lot cheaper in those days. So he arranges to give the roses to the doorman of this office building, saying they are for Miss Fort. So he sits in a car and waits, and she comes out eventually, and it's quite dark. And, oh, roses for me. From whom? Well, he wouldn't say. So then he knows who the woman is, and he follows her. And I suppose we get the obligatory love scene, which has led to much mockery. But as I explained earlier, I don't find the idea of Walter Matthau as someone very successful with women. I don't find it at all risible. And I'm not going to spoil the ending for you, the plot, because the plot is a great part of this movie. I mean, there's some movies where it's all plot and no acting or anything else, or there's no plot and everything else is good. This movie has everything that you want in a movie. And, one finds oneself rooting for Walter Matthau because of his courage, intelligence, and indefatigability. And the movie's ending is ingenious. And this is one of my favorite films of the 1970s. And I'm delighted to report, after years of this movie being available only in a crummy DVD transfer, it is now available in Blu-ray, both from Britain and from America. I would rate the British edition better, but I suppose either will do. Again, if this is a movie that you've ever seen on television or DVD, say, and watching it on the Blu-ray, you just think, wow, this looks so beautiful compared to what I have seen in the past. And I have to say, to wrap up, it's a shame that so many people are watching movies now on small screens, and they are losing so much of what makes a film, which is the visual presentation. So those are my thoughts on Charlie Barrett. So let's look at the chat here. The bed scene was a bit gratuitous, says Anne Run. I read that it was put on at Mathau's request. He wanted to be seen in bed with an attractive woman. Well, yeah. The actress playing Miss Fort was Jack Lemmon's wife, and there's a story out there that he thought this would be a big joke at the expense of his friend Jack Lemmon. It could be seen as gratuitous. Okay, this is a man's movie, no question about it. We have to throw in some romance in there to humanize Walter Matthau. But he'd already been humanized at the beginning because he had a very close relationship with his wife, who was quite a looker. Halper says, I grew up on Pan and Scan VHS. I don't know whether any of you are old enough to remember that you'd be watching the Pan and Scan and you would see the opening credits, and then the aspect ratio would change after the credits were over. It's like, whoa, what happened? Okay. Cecil Henry makes a comment about women like getting hit. Now, the photographer, Jewel, in the film gets smacked by Joe Don Baker. Sherry North. She was she was considered a Marilyn Monroe imitator in the 1950s. She had a long career. Joe Don Baker hits her across the face, and I don't know there's so much a question of whether she likes it or not. It's just she seems to accept the inevitable. That is to say that it would be pointless to get in Joe Don Baker's way. Okay, the scene where Baker, the scene where Baker hits a woman who enjoys it also would offend modern sensibilities. Joe Don will always be Mitchell to me. Oh, yes, I didn't drive 600 miles for the amusement of morons. There is, he has a lot of great lines in this film. And one of my favorites is a safe house that he is directed to by Benson Fong is a legal whorehouse. And it's well played because they look like these whores do. That's to say they're not very good looking, except there is a young woman, one of the whores, a blonde, who is actually very attractive, and she is offered to Molly as, on the house, as it were, right? And you're thinking, this is quite a good-looking young woman, but he's not having any of it. He wants to sleep, and he wants his breakfast. He says, when I wake, I appreciate 2 3.5-minute eggs, a piece of dry whole wheat toast, and a pot of hot herb tea. And the madam says, is there anything else we could do for your pleasure? Janet is a nice girl. And he says, I don't sleep with whores. Not knowingly, anyway. I really like the insistence that, Joe Don Baker's character, Molly, again, they're not making him any more than he needs to be. He's interesting enough as he is. He's relentless in his quest, and he's very good at what he does. What do you think of Glenn Ross? I like everything about it. I like the screenplay. I like the directing. And I like the acting. And of course, the movie version has the famous Alec Baldwin scene, which isn't in the play. I understand that when they produce the play now, it doesn't have the Alec Baldwin scene in it. And why would you do that? Why would you do that? Gandalf says, I think KMG was complaining about how it seems like the only valued quality of lead actors and actresses is that they are good looking. It helps. It helps. John Wayne was an extraordinarily good looking man. He was considered a male beauty. So was Gary Cooper. Oh, by the way, I was talking about that actress, Cassandra something or other. No. Charisma Carpenter, complaining about the director being mean. John Wayne was dicked around in pretty much every movie he made with John Ford. This is John Wayne, the most popular actor in America. But John Wayne put up with it because he made great films with John Ford. Do these people think that working on a movie set is going to be easy? This is a hothouse condition. It's completely unnatural. People working, 10, 12 hours a day, and you don't know when you're going to be called from the trailer, but when you show up on your mark, you're supposed to bring it right then and there, and maybe maybe the script's been changed, because scripts are often changed, that's why they get paid the big bucks. I was reading this long piece about Shelley Duvall today. Was it in the Hollywood Reporter? But she's a recluse in Texas now, and apparently she got crazy some years ago, but they like her there in this small town in Texas. And of course, the intensity of the role that she plays in The Shining, where she has to be in a state of hysteria for about half the movie, and it has to seem real. And this is one of the things that makes The Shining so great, is that you see, in most horror films, you see people, especially women, who are supposed to be, scared for their lives, and they don't seem to be scared for their lives. They don't seem to be particularly horrified. Well, Shelley Duvall appears to be genuinely horrified, which is a hard thing to pull off, and it took a lot out of her, no question about it. And you can see the documentary that Kubrick's daughter made, where he's telling her off on the set, that we're all out here, busting our asses and waiting for you, and then you're not ready. Well, as I say, that's why they get paid the big bucks. That's the show for today. I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. What is coming up on the book club tomorrow? It is Nick Kent's memoir of being a rock critic in Britain and America in the 1970s, called Apathy for the Devil. And what is coming up on Theater Thursday next week? It's a war film from 1949, directed by Henry King, starring Gregory Peck and Dean Jagger, called 12 O'Clock High, which has some spectacular aerial footage in it. But it is primarily a psychological drama of the problems of command. So if you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you would click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. If you would like to donate to this live stream, which I could really use at the moment, my PayPal address is at Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. And if you're Canadian, you can donate money directly to this live stream via Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear listeners and viewers, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.